Welcome to today's Career Coffee. I'm Jennifer Baghdad. I'm the president of Minnesota PRSA this year, and honored and privileged to do so and be in that role. I just wanted to say a little bit about Minnesota PRSA and our program today. So we launched these career coffees to offer PR and communications professionals a friendly and engaging place to seek and get and ask for career advice. So in your career, in classes, you probably heard about networking, about getting coffee, and both of these activities could seem intimidating. Sometimes it's hard to know how to get started or where to get started with that. What does it mean to actually get coffee? What are you trying to get out of it? So in today's session, we're really going to explore the art and the science of getting coffee. And to do so, we're thrilled to have Arik Hanson join us this morning. And he's going to facilitate this conversation. Arik is the principal of ACH Communications, a marketing and communications consultancy, and helps his clients understand the latest trends and technologies in digital and social media. And additionally, Arik pens an annual post on his blog specifically focusing on how to approach someone and how to make the most of the opportunity of getting coffee. So thanks, Arik, for joining us today and for leading this discussion. And we're also joined by some recent graduates and young professionals who have used getting coffee to expand their network and find opportunities. And so thank you to Saskia Van Riessen, Beth Wellman, and Liz Erickson for joining us today. And just a couple more housekeeping items before I turn it over to Arik. So I wanted to give a huge thanks to Kara who is supporting from a technical perspective today, to Eva Kaiser, who is the chair of our Career Coffee program, to Alyssa Augustine, who is the board liaison for our Career Center in Minnesota PRSA. And, some of you or many of you on the phone may be members of PRSA. If you're not, thank you for coming. If you are, also, I'm just thrilled to have you here taking advantage of some of the great programming that we offer throughout the year. And I would just encourage anybody on the phone to, if you're not already super involved with PRSA, and I know the folks who are joining me here on camera have been involved in one way or another, but I just encourage you to get involved. So this is actually part of the networking and the value of PRSA. So this is a really great place to meet these people and across all career levels and get the most out of PRSA is really through our connections and the connections we make. So there are a lot of volunteer opportunities. Make sure to check out our website at minnesotaprsa.org. And to that end, we also have quite a number of events coming up through the remainder of the year. So we have a social event coming up in July, so more information to come, but it's going to be fun to finally get to visit with each other in person, and no formal programming, just a way to get together and enjoy being together in a COVID safe space. So that means outdoors. That we will also be having our next career coffee on August 19th, where we'll be discussing advocating for yourself and becoming a career champion. September is PRSA Ethics Month, and we'll be putting up some programming for you to join in the very near future. And then in October is D&I month, and we also do an annual program around D&I. So there's lots of good things coming up. And lastly, I just want to extend a huge thanks to our annual sponsors, Diamond sponsor Nuger, Emerald sponsors Brandpoint and Weber Shandwick, and our Sapphire sponsor Padilla. So the event is being recorded. All participants are on mute, and please feel free to submit your questions through the discussion board, through the chat. And Arik, I'm going to turn it over to you. So thanks everybody for joining.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. How's everyone doing today? Good morning. Everyone got their coffee? Everyone got their coffee? I'm very excited. When Jennifer was talking there, I was kind of scrolling through to see some of the attendees, and nice to see some familiar faces on the call, including a number of students from my class at the University of St. Thomas. So thanks for joining us today. Like Jennifer said, my name is Arik Hanson. I'm an independent social media consultant. And this coffee discussion is as kind of Jennifer alluded to, an interesting one for me, and I'm in a unique position to talk about this, I think, because of being the independent consultant person, where I essentially get paid to have coffee more than people do on the agency level or the corporate level or the nonprofit level or what have you. So, in any given year, I'm sitting down with maybe 80 to 100 people for coffee. So I've been doing this 12 years, like that's like 1,000 coffees. So I see a lot of things, I pick up on things, I kind of see what not to do and what to do. So I have some strong opinions. I'll share a few of those today, but I'm much more interested to hear what our panelists have to say, because like Jennifer mentioned, this call is all about helping people become more comfortable with doing this. And these three ladies are going to have some great insights on how they've done that and how they think you all can probably get a little more comfortable with that as well. So with that, I'm going to spend just a few minutes introducing them and I'll get right to the discussion. So Liz Joseph is a senior communications specialist at Thrivent. She's also spent time at Lola Red, Evine, and Best Buy in her career, and is a graduate of Metro State University, which I'm sure our colleagues Greg Zimprich and Rose McKinney will be happy to hear. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
My networking question for you on the spot, and I'm putting them on the spot with these. I didn't ask them these in advance, so they don't know what's coming here. Oh. What's your favorite place to get together for coffee in the Twin Cities?
Ooh, Spy House. Any Spy House. Love their coffee.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Good answer. Saskia Van Riessen is an insight strategist with Colle McVoy, where she's been employed for almost a year and a half. Before that, she interned at Weber Shandwick in Broadhead. She, I'm disappointed to say, is University of Wisconsin graduate. Sorry about that. Condolences. Saskia, good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Who, now me and you had coffee early on in your search. So I know you had a bunch of them. Who is the most interesting person you've had coffee with so far?
I might have to say my dad. I went to him for a lot of networking advice, so it's a bit of a mentor to me.
Good answer. Dads like that answer. And Beth Wellman is a project manager with Brandpoint, where she's had multiple roles since 2018. She's also been very active in PRSA, as Jennifer mentioned about all three of you, and she sits on the communications committee. She is also a graduate of Metro State, so Greg and Rose doing something right over there. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
What is your go-to coffee drink of choice?
Ooh, definitely.
Straight black?
Oh, definitely not. I am not a straight black coffee fan, unfortunately. I like a little coffee with my cream. So I usually get just a normalized coffee with the toffee nut flavor from Starbucks and then cream. So
okay, that sounds good. Everyone's got their coffee drink. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty basic drink, really tasty. Love it.
All right. Well, let's get the discussion started. We're going to spend about a good, hour or so, 45 minutes talking with panelists and getting that discussion going. And in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll take questions from you all on the call. So you can send those to us, I believe, through the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the tail end. So first, let's start with a little bit, just very briefly about the why behind this whole coffee thing. So Saskia, I just mentioned, you and I had coffee a while back virtually, and I was really impressed with your approach and how you handled yourself and how you approached the coffee and stuff like that. What has been the value of the networking so far in your career?
Yeah, I think when I was first starting out back in college, I was just trying to get a sense of if I wanted to be on the client side or the agency side. And so just trying to meet with people on both sides was really helpful. And then I think just getting a sense of what they do once I knew I wanted to be on the agency side, kind of being torn between strategy and PR, and just trying to meet with people that now work in jobs that I do, just to get a sense of what their day was like, what they liked about their job, what they didn't like about their job. So I think just getting to know what people do, and then just starting to build a network and just get to know people that can open up doors for you and have some friendly faces in the industry.
So Beth, I know that networking landed your job at Brandpoint? How does it play a role for you early on?
So networking, I was, ever since my first PR class, PRSA has been mentioned a handful of times, I should say. And at first I was a little bit scared to join. I didn't know what it would all entail, how much of a time commitment it would be. Just the whole anxiety of just like meeting a ton of people you don't know all at once. So to make a long story short, what ended up happening is that one of these PRSA events, two people who are now my coworkers were also in attendance at this event. And as a young professional, you're pretty much curious about, or one of the main things I should say is, you guys hiring? You gonna give me a job? But as you attend more of these events, you know that you just start to realize that that's not all networking is about. So I met two ladies, asked them if they were hiring. And they said, not right now. I don't think that we have anything posted. But then they said, give us your contact info. We'll keep in touch. And I was kind of a little reluctant in believing that at first. I was just like, yeah, maybe they'll reach out, maybe they won't. And then about a month or two later, one of the ladies reached out to me and said, hey, we've got this opening for a sales assistant, which was later transitioned the title into account coordinator, just to more closely reflect what the job entailed. And I interviewed, phone interview, and then a couple of in-person ones, and then they called me and offered me the position.
There you go. Boom. Networking in action. So let's see. Now that we talked a little bit about why networking is important, let's talk about, and Saskia, you kind of referred to this just a second ago, but like, how do you decide who to network with, who to sit down with? Because you're giving up, an hour of your time to do, more than an hour of your time to do this if you're doing it in person, because you're traveling and things like that sometimes. So Liz, how have you gone about that so far? What's been your decision-making process in terms of like who you want to get to know and who you agree to have coffee with?
Yeah, good question. I would say I always looked to make it organic. I never wanted to make it seem like, obviously I was out there. You're networking for a reason and everyone knows that, but I wanted it to be an organic conversation, an organic relationship. Someone that I knew or, had a connection with. It wasn't just like a random cold call, or if you ever get a random ad and you're like, why am I getting targeted with this? I basically took that same approach with who I wanted to connect with over coffee, just because I felt like when it was someone that I either had a connection with or had some commonalities with, it just made the conversation flow that much easier. And I would say both myself and the person I was meeting with was more likely to get something out of it. So that was my approach to how I went about finding people to connect with over coffee.
Saskia, what about you? Because you started from scratch. You started from scratch, obviously, and you found me, and we didn't know each other. So how did you find new people?
Yeah, so I was like out of state when I was in college, and so when I was in college, I would use just the people that I went to school with. So I'd pick an agency that I was interested, check out their LinkedIn, and just find a few people that went to school there. I agree that it's definitely easier to do organically, but I think using your alumni network can be a good way because those people are usually receptive. And so I would, send a message to them on LinkedIn and say, hi, saw that you're also a Badger and working at, this agency. If you're willing, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your role over a 30-minute coffee sometime. Let me know what you think. And most often than not, they would respond and say yes. And then it's just about taking it from there. So I think I've also used just, if a friend or a family friend or a neighbor says like, hey, I know someone that works here. That's another good way too. But I think the alumni network has definitely been really powerful.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I mean, the Tommies on the call that have my class are probably sick of me hearing them talk about reach out to the Tommy network, man. They're really strong. And for UW grads, I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, as a Minnesota person, like that's a strong network too. Metro State, same thing. So that's a great place to start. I would also say, here's another tip though, I would say is like when you're at the tail end of your coffee, maybe it's like, well, hey, is there one or two other people you know that you think I should be with? You know, that's always an easy thing to throw in there. And it's like, really, it's rarely skin off the other person's back to do that. So. Yeah,
someone had told me that too. So then like you're always ending your coffee with an idea for someone else. And so you're just keeping it going. Yeah, just asking like, is there anyone else that you think it'd be good to connect with is a really good way to end the in-person conversation.
Right. Yeah. Or you could offer that up too, right? Like, is there anyone that I can introduce you to, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Because you guys have strong networks too. So let's talk about the meeting itself, because I know that's kind of part of what makes a lot of people nervous, really. Is like, well, I'm going to sit down to coffee with someone, and whether it's someone, you know, a peer your own age, or maybe it's like a senior vice president, I don't know, you could be pretty nervous, you know? So Beth, what do you do when you're, you know, preparing for your coffee? Talk us through your process.
Yeah, so I like to make sure that I take pride in how I look, make sure I'm put together. I don't necessarily show up in a full business suit, but I like to pick out a decent outfit that, you know, makes it not only appear like I have my stuff together, but also that, you know, I take pride in, you know, my personality as well as my appearance. And I like to make sure that I look nice. And then I also like to pay attention to getting enough sleep the night before, because if you show up and you've got bags under your eyes and everything, I like to make sure I get enough sleep just so I can not look like I need a lot of caffeine, which is, I guess, the reason why you're there for the coffee in the first place.
Yeah, right.
And then I also like to make sure that I am organized. So I like to make sure I bring like a notebook. So if there's any notes I'd like to take, or things that that the other person says during the meeting, that I can write that down and say, oh wow, that's a really great tip, or that's a really great point, or a perspective on a certain issue, or things like that.
And I'll tell you, as someone that's done a lot of these things, like if you just the fact of bringing a notebook and writing notes down, huge separator, huge. Like if you don't, I mean, in fact, I did a kind of social experiment with a guy I had coffee with yesterday. Like we sat down, we started talking, and then I kind of gently took my notebook out and put it right in front of me. And guess what he did? He gently took his notebook and put it right in front of him. So I think that's a huge sign that, like, especially as younger people, like that you're paying attention, you're taking notes, and you care. And like, as someone that's on the senior side of that makes a big difference. Cause like, I don't think the message isn't that like, hey, we're so senior and you need to learn from us. It's more like you care enough that you clearly prepared, you have questions. Like, it's even better if like you show up and you open your notebook and I see that you wrote like 10 questions down, like, holy crap. Okay. This person's got it together. That's a huge differentiator, I think. So good for you. Liz, what about you? What about you? Anything different in your process, your approach?
No, I mean, well, yeah, a couple different things, but echoing that too, I am a huge advocate of preparing beforehand with questions. Exactly to your point, Eric. It just shows that you care, you put the time in, that you're being cognizant of their time. Just knowing, especially if you're meeting with someone at that SVP level, that they're really busy, and so you want, you know, you're taking advantage of that time and you're not wasting their time. Another thing I liked to do is research them beforehand, check out their LinkedIn, look at their social, see what they're all about. And even taking it a step further, I've actually researched the companies that they're currently working at, and then looking them up in Google News. So what's going on at their company, and asking really specific questions for what that means in the communications and PR space for them. I cannot say how far that has gotten me with my coffee meetings, because they're just kind of like, wow, you know, thanks for asking about that. And so just a good tip there.
And taking that even one step further, and you've probably done this, is like, you know, and this is where it feels a little stalkerish, right? Because like to research someone on LinkedIn feels normal, right? Like, okay, everyone does that. Fairly normal. People are peeking on you all the time. But to research someone on Instagram and Facebook is a little more stalkerish, right? Because it's like some people feel very personal about that, and they lock their profiles down so you can't see them sometimes. But I would say, I think it's a good idea to do that and tread softly, because like I think about it, like I think about coffee meetups like sometimes like when you get together with your manager. Like the best managers I had, they started every single meeting we had. One specific person I had that I loved with, how's your family doing? How are your kids doing? Like we talked about personal stuff before we talked about business. And like that's a secret coffee hit. Like you get them talking about, like here's the superpower. Like if you research someone and you figure out, like for example, Mark Jensen's on the call. Mark's a professor at the U. I got to know Mark years ago. He's a huge U of M fan, right? One of the biggest Gopher rubes I know. I could figure that out pretty quickly by looking at his profile. You get him talking about Gopher basketball or Gopher football, like he starts smiling, right? And then now, boom, right? The conversation totally changes. So researching them on the personal level is, you know, just as great, I think, as researching them on the professional level. Saskia, let's talk a little bit about like during the coffee though. So like, again, that can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially if you're just starting and you're building confidence, right? And especially now, like I found the last couple of weeks coming out of the pandemic, like we're all rusty, right? We've all been at home and now we're meeting in person with people, and it's intimidating, and it's for everybody. What have you found works, or do you have any tips for people in terms of like, how do you hold your composure? How do you kind of keep it together so it's not obvious that you're as nervous as you probably are?
Yeah, I think that tip about just like knowing something about them personally really helps, so that you're starting off the coffee not just like talking about the weather, but like if you know you have something in common, like you both went to school together, like just quickly intro it up with like, what dorm were you in? Or like, what was your favorite spot on campus? And just like start to get a little bit more comfortable with each other just by some sort of commonality there. And then I personally think that during the coffee, the person that you're chatting with should be talking probably upwards of like 75% of the time. So that's something to keep in mind. But I always like to just say, like, I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I like want to hear a lot about you. But I think that context about yourself and like where you are in your career and what you're looking for just helps the person that you're chatting with a little bit. So I give them just like a little bit of a blurb about myself. And then, you know, obviously you've looked at their LinkedIn profile already, like, you know, kind of how their career trajectory has gone. But I always just like to ask, like, I know you started here, but I'd love to just like hear kind of your journey in your own words, and just kind of understand like where they're coming from. And before you kind of get into more targeted conversations and questions.
That's a great tip. That 75-25 in particular, that I can't tell you how many people I sit down with, and it's just like, like if you're the one asking for the coffee, right? Like let's say I'm getting together with, I see Dan Jasper on the card. Like let's say I'm getting together with Dan at the Mall of America. Like Dan's pretty big fish at the Mall of America, right? Like I want to, and it's a really cool job. He's got all sorts of stories, right? So like the last thing I want to do is show up with the coffee and run my mouth for 90 minutes because like he's got the cool stories, not me. Like I want to hear from him. And not to mention, like, how's Dan going to feel when he leaves the coffee after he's talked about how great he is, right? He's going to feel great. He's going to be like, that was a great coffee. I really enjoyed meeting with Saskia. She was fantastic, you know, when he did all the talking, you know? Yeah. They like to talk about themselves.
Yeah. And that's why I think, like, don't be hesitant to like reaching out to people to ask for coffee, because even now, like a couple years into my career, like I love doing it. I'm happy to do it for people and, you know, pay it forward for all the people that did that for me when I was looking for a job. So yeah, people love talking about themselves. Most people like their jobs enough to talk about it for at least 30 minutes. So definitely don't hesitate to do it.
Yeah, great tip. Beth, what about you? What about your body language in a meeting? Like, how could you handle, like, are you cognizant of your body language when you're sitting there together with someone with coffee, like eye contact, you know, how you fold your legs, maybe like stuff like that? Do you think
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely being aware of how you're positioning yourself. Yeah, exactly. If you're fidgeting too much, maintaining eye contact is great. In between, of course, jotting down notes. excuse me, I'd also say just don't be distracted. I'm just getting over a cold, so excuse me. I have that last few days of it. But yeah, don't be distracted by your surroundings. If you're meeting for coffee, you're in a coffee shop, and obviously there's quite a bit going on around you. But just try your best to just stay focused on the conversation, and that'll go a long way.
So Beth, let's talk about the post coffee a little bit. That's just as big a part of the process as anything else. What do you usually do after the coffee to make sure you're carving out some brain space in the head of the person you had coffee with?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm not already connected with them on LinkedIn, I definitely would start by sending a LinkedIn invite, along with just a little note, kind of thanking / kind of reminding them who I am, in case they have coffee a lot like you. Yeah, like, hey, thank you for meeting. This is Beth. We met a couple days ago. Get a coffee. Thank you for your time. Just kind of making sure that you're acknowledging that, not only did you take the time to do it, but they did, because PR people's time is valuable.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever send like a handwritten note? What's your criteria for if you send email versus?
I usually. Yeah. So the note that I include along with like the LinkedIn request, that's just like a more general brief one. And then if possible, definitely handwritten notes are the way to go, because it actually shows that you took more time than it took to just type out a few words. Because again, if you do copy a lot, you can just copy and paste those words and then just change, who it's to. Mm-hmm. And, in my opinion, it's kind of the easier way out. It's at least something, so definitely still do that. But the handwritten note it's more personable, and I know a lot more people appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's a good question for all three of you too. Like, is there any kind of what's the most creative thing has you done any kind of creative tactic after coffee that really worked well for you by chance?
I'd say, I think, yeah, definitely echoing a thank you note. And if you're going to send an email, just like make it personalized. You never want to send a thank you note that you could copy and paste. So just like add some tidbits about your meeting. I'll say, like, if someone during the coffee has said like, oh, I definitely need to introduce you to this person, like in that thank you note, I'll say, like, I know you mentioned introducing me to this person, like, would really appreciate that. And I'll send just like a little blurb about myself that maybe they can just copy and paste, so they don't have to come up with like a story about me when they're trying to introduce me to that person. But I think that's a good way to just like make sure that then that introduction happens. And I think then also to your question, like the idea of like following up with people and staying in touch with people can be a little bit intimidating. But one thing that has helped me is just sending like a helpful article or link that's relevant to your conversation. So I did a coffee and we were talking about like TikTok for a client. And then in Eric's newsletter, he'd actually shared an article that was relevant to that. And this was on a Friday. So then in kind of my thank you note, I just was like, oh, I know that we chatted about this during our coffee, like saw this, and this made me think of this part of our conversation. So I think that's a really good way to kind of like add value to their work too, and a good way to just follow up.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that makes the case for opening up the notebook, right? Because like if you're taking notes, right, and writing stuff down, like I got together with a guy a week ago, and I remember we started talking about like North Shore. So I'm a huge North Shore guy. We go up there like 4 times a year. And he was talking about, we can't really find a place. So like when I followed up with him, I'm like, hey, check out this place, and this place. So it's just like what you said, like whatever you talked about, whether it's, professional or personal, like follow up, that's your follow up right there. Because it shows you paid attention, you were taking notes, like it's just all the good things.
Mm-hmm.
That more than anything, get you noticed, I would say. Yeah,
that's a good tip though. I never thought about it being like personal. Like if you talked about the North Shore, like send your favorite restaurant or something there too.
again, that makes it, I just think the personal stuff actually makes you stand out more, because yes, it's about the professional stuff, right? Like we all network because we want to get to know more people, we want better jobs, all the stuff, right? But it's the personal connections that get you to that spot, right? Because you don't become professional friends with someone because you're just good at your job. It's the personal connections you form, and those are through like, where do you vacation, where do you like to go to eat, what are your favorite coffee drink, all that kind of stuff. I still remember, I'm going to bring up a lot of Mall of America stories since I see Dan right there on my screen. When there was a woman that used to work for you, Dan, called Erica Dow, who I'm sure you remember. And when I worked with you guys years and years and years ago, I remember I was like, hey, I need a new coffee drink. And we're walking around the mall and she's like, oh my God, have you ever tried a Vietnamese coffee? And I'm like, oh my God, no, please introduce me. And she brought me to Caribou and she's like, hey, this is what you asked for. And I did that. And I'll tell you, I've been drinking that for, when did I meet Erica? Maybe 10 years ago, 10 years. I've been drinking that drink for 10 years. So like, and I remember Erica. So like, there it is, power of a connection right there with the personal stuff versus always the professional stuff. So this is a good question for, let me start with you, Saskia, actually on this. How have you gone about building a network? Like when you were at Madison, like how'd you start out building a network when you were still in school? Because I know that's a challenge for a lot of students as they start out. Like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know, how am I gonna meet people? It's really intimidating. Like you seem to have done a pretty good job of that. How did you do that?
Thanks. Yeah, I personally, like, I'm a pretty outgoing person, but like professional networking events, like definitely really scared me when I was in college. So I found it a lot easier to just start with those one-on-one coffees where you can have those personal conversations. So yeah, if I had like a neighbor or a family friend that was like, hey, I have a good friend that works at this agency, like I'd be happy to, introduce you. Like just take that, like take what you can get back when you're just starting to build your network. And then, yeah, I think like using the alumni network, reach out to people on LinkedIn. But what really helped me was just at the end of a coffee, just asking like if there was anyone else that they thought would be good for me to meet. And then just like making sure you follow up with that person. So I think just continuing that, those questions has been that was the biggest help. And then just trying to do them when you're home over spring break and winter break and summer break. So maybe just planning ahead a little bit and saying like, hey, I'm going to be home for this week. Do you have any availability like on this day, or this day? And just trying to make it as easy for them as possible too.
Yeah. What about you, Beth? What did you do when you, I know Greg and Rose probably hammered that probably as much as I do, but how did you approach that when you were, and you had the advantage of being here in the city versus Saskia, who was down in Madison, but how did you approach that as a student?
Right. Yeah. So it kind of actually, the seed was planted when I had my first PR class. Janet Sochikowski was my teacher, another heavily involved in PRSA professor / PR pro. And not only should you use your, your school connections, your teachers and your mentors, but Janet also had connected me to one of her fellow PR pros who was looking to have people join the communications committee, which I'm now a part of. And that was probably my first PR coffee, I guess, meeting. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but, I wanted to look prepared and everything. So I did what I said. I brought the notebook, I took notes, kind of asked her just what all the general committee would involve, like how much time does it commit, what is the committee responsible for doing? And then that's kind of how I got my foot in the door with becoming part of PRSA, is because, I was looking for other ways to get involved, other things I could, good experience that, not only would actually give me sort of real working PR experience, but also, it's something that you can also put on your resume, and not a lot of people think about putting their various organizations on their resume. Mm-hmm. But that's definitely something that you should do.
So, Liz, I have a question for you. We have all three of you have demanding jobs, obviously. I'm not singling you out for this, but like you have a demanding job at Thrivent. You worked at a busy agency. how are you finding time to network when you have, this demanding job where it's like, I'm busy, man, I don't have time to network. You're clearly, all three of you are clearly finding time to do that. How are you doing that? What are your tips and tricks for doing that?
Yeah, I think the thing with networking is people often look at it almost as like this ginormous task, and it really, you don't have to do it as much as you think. Like, what's that saying? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so I just set small, achievable goals. So maybe that's I meet for coffee with someone new once a quarter, or once a month. I mean, depending on what my timing is looking like. So really just setting kind of those small achievable goals. And especially with COVID, I would say we've had to get a little bit creative, obviously. So I've kind of approached my networking too with thinking outside of the box and getting creative on social. So finding people in the field that I admire and commenting on their posts and liking, their posts and just engaging with them. And that in and of itself is also a form of networking. And so I would say setting small goals, setting achievable goals, not trying to do too much, and also getting creative with how you're networking has been my approach to it since kind of jumping into my career.
That's a great point about the commenting on other people's stuff and being strategic about it. I love that. Like, talk more about that. How do you do that?
I mean, it's really just, step one, only comment on something that truly resonates with you, right? You don't want to force anything or make it seem fake, essentially, but just finding those people, again, that you resonate with, and they post an article or a blog, or they repost something from the Strib. It's like, hey, I saw that too, and here was my thought on it, and starting a dialogue and making it kind of a two-way street and asking questions, or maybe it's sending them an instant message and saying, hey, I noticed you posted that. I have a couple questions about it. And just kind of seeing how it, it makes sense for you so that it's coming off in more of a personal way.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, that's like social media 101, but some people forget about it, like it's hard to, and no one does it. And I can tell you, like, people do notice who's commenting on their stuff, especially on like LinkedIn, where there's not as much commenting, and it's got to be thoughtful, right? So like, if you leave a comment on, you're trying to get, let's say you're trying to get in the door, like, Carmichael, and you want to get Julie Batliner's attention, like, you leave a thoughtful comment on there, I guarantee you she's seeing that, and she's like, oh, I wonder who that is, because she's probably always recruiting, right? So like, that's a fantastic idea. Saskia, do you have any thoughts on that? How are you doing that as, like, you're a busy agency person now? Like, and you got to be, and I know how agency goes, right? Like, you got to be billable. How are you dealing with that pressure? And then, okay, I got to find time to network on my own then.
Yeah, I think, just like checking LinkedIn and just starting to kind of like, maybe on a Saturday, just compile a list, kind of like Liz said, of like, these are a few people I'd like to meet like over the next few months, and just making it a little bit more manageable and just trying to do, like 2 a month maybe. And I also think I was part of the PRSA Student Relations Committee, volunteering with them for a couple of years. And that's kind of like built-in networking, because it's just a committee of like 20 plus people, and you're working together on an event. And those are people, on the client side, agency side, but representing a good handful of top agencies and companies. So I think sometimes just getting involved in volunteering with an organization you're passionate about, and there's so many of them here in the Twin Cities, is just like built-in networking too.
Yeah, that's great. And the coffee list, I love the coffee. I mean, I publish my coffee list, and I think that might rub some people the wrong way, but I do it. But I love, you don't have to publish it, obviously. Like, I love the fact that you and Liz are like thinking of your coffee list. Like, who are the people I want to get to know? I think that's really smart, because like, there's something to be said for that, because like a lot of people will be like, well, I'll have coffee with anyone that asks me. And that's fine. Like, there'll be people that ask you that you get together with and you help them. But being purposeful about who you're getting together with, who you want to get to know, that's the secret, because like this should help shape like who you are and where you go in your career, and like getting to know the right people is a huge part of that. So
yeah. And I think like, don't wait to do that until you're looking for a job. Like, even when you're happy in your job, like still trying to be meeting people and following up with people that have really resonated with you, so that, you know, maybe they're there when you are in that time.
Yeah. Let's talk about kind of the secret sauce of networking, which is this kind of two-way value exchange. You guys have all alluded to it throughout here, where it's like, there's got to be something in it for both sides. One thing I run up against a lot is people looking for help finding a job, right? Which is great. Like, everyone needs help finding a job, right? Sometimes. But if what I struggle with that sometimes, like when people, personally, when people come to me and it's like, help me, help me, help me. And there's, what about me, man? I'm sitting right here. Like, I need help too, doing something. And it doesn't even have to be work either, right? So like, let's talk about the value exchange, Beth. Like, what does that look like for you when you sit down with someone? Like, how do you think about, like, okay, I want to help. They want something from me, but I want something from them. There's got to be a two-way street. Right.
Yeah. I definitely think that, you know, obviously, like you said, getting a job is important, but I think there's just that two-way mutual street. Like, the definition of PR is to create a mutually beneficial relationship. So you have to make sure that maybe you get on a topic about a certain, or get on a conversation about a certain topic, and you can provide insight and just talk about it from various different perspectives. And then there's also just taking that chance to kind of, you know, learn about I don't want to say the other generation, because sometimes you're really, you know, close in generations and stuff, but if there's like a different type of work that maybe the other person's not familiar with, then ask them about it. You can mutually learn various different things from each other, and just being able to openly acknowledge that is very important.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Liz? How do you think about that when you sit down with someone?
Yeah, similar to Beth a little bit. I feel like the people that I've met with, or even myself, we're just in the day-to-day of our work, we're so focused on what we're doing and crossing things off the to-do list that we don't always have the time to find new emerging trends, new tools to use, things like that. And actually, one coffee that stands out to me was actually a student from the U that I had coffee with, and she started talking to me about this was like a year ago, or however, it was over a year ago, but TikTok and how it was coming, and then to kind of see how that's played out. And so just, you know, thinking of these as opportunities to know that the person that you're meeting with is in their day-to-day, usually has their head down. So in order to have that mutually beneficial connection, bring something to them that they could maybe take away from the conversation, tell them about an emerging trend. I think that just brings something new to the conversation, and not a lot of people do it. So
no, that's the key. And even if you know, what I think the smart people will do is, like, they'll bring a value exchange item to the meeting. Like that happens in your research, right? Like, you start looking someone up and you're like, okay, I bet you they could use this. I bet you they could use that. And then you got one in your hip pocket, you know. That's like a high level tip, but there's got to be that, and it's got to be long lasting too. Like, it's kind of like, you know, networking is kind of like dating, right? Like, you meet someone professionally, and it's like, you're either going to hit it off or you're not. And like, if you hit it off though, it's like, okay, I have to figure out how to be beneficial to this person so we can start a professional relationship, right?
It's almost just like how we approach our relationships with reporters, you know, and journalists. Yeah. It's exactly the same way.
Yeah, you got to make yourself useful in a way. And it could be personally. It doesn't always have to be professionally. It could be like, oh, North Shore, I could go back to the North Shore thing. It could be like, oh, I give the guy 3 tips on North Shore and he stayed at one of the places. Like, he's going to think of me when he does that again. So that two-way thing is such a huge part of networking. And that just, again, that alone can make you really stand out. I think. So Saskia, I want to ask you about this one. How do you, and well, it's a good question for all three of you. How does your approach differ? Like, if you're meeting with, because you're meeting with all sorts of people, right? You're meeting with people, you know, at your level, at your colleague level. You're meeting with people like a manager level, and then sometimes you might be meeting with people like the VP, owner level, stuff like that. does your approach differ with each person, or is it the same for you all three?
It differs. I think if I was meeting with someone that was more entry level, like I would just want to figure out what their day looks like, just to try and figure out if I would like that job. That's a good place to ask, like, what's the worst part of your job? Like, what's the best part of your job? Like, just try and get to like the realness of it. And I think meeting with someone that's a little bit more senior, they probably have a bit more sway in the company. And so they're a good person to ask about like their leadership, or like what are the important values to the agency or the company. They have a little bit more sway. So I think just, trying to differ, like know what you want to get out of it, whether that's, maybe a specific connection somewhere else. Not that you should ever lead with that question at all, but if you're trying to figure out what their day-to-day work is like, that's going to be very different for someone that's entry level versus more senior at a company.
Yeah. Beth, any different thoughts on that question? How have you dealt with that in the past with people?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat the question again?
I mean, like when you met with, the question is like, how do you, does your approach differ at different levels? So for example, you probably met with Scott at some point, right? Like, did your approach differ when you met with Scott Severson at Brandpoint versus like when you met with someone, at like a mid-level?
Yeah, so it probably does. I'm usually, like the higher up people get, the more I'm trying to think of how to word it. Well, with Scott, what I did was I reached out based on an event that he was going to be speaking at, and just kind of, I thanked him for sharing his knowledge and stuff. And I think that acknowledging that, what each person at each level is either good at or kind of what you recognize them for is what I like to do. And so the approach itself might be similar, but what I say to them is really what kind of differs. So when you're meeting with like somebody closer to your level, you kind of meet and discuss, similar interests and more similarities than there are differences. And, the higher up people get, it's the more you're probably learning more than, well, actually, I don't know, maybe I guess you're learning at either level, but I feel like the value of the information is definitely important, the higher up that you go.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. So I love your point about approaching Scott at a meeting or like an event.
Yeah.
How did you think about, how did you muster up the courage to do that? That's hard to do sometimes.
So I had kind of been researching, my current company. I was researching them for a little while just because I had kind of seen the name floating around, and I was like, what do this company does? And then I was like, oh, this company would be great to work for. It's a smaller company, and I was kind of looking for that sort of initial step into the industry because, to be honest, the idea of working at a giant agency, while it is definitely, has always been a huge goal of mine, I kind of wanted to start out a little bit smaller and be able to kind of form that relationship and kind of have almost like a close family with my company. And when I reached out to Scott, I was just like, okay, well, if I make a good impression on the president, that's probably a really good thing. So I was like, okay, so this guy, so he works at Brandpoint, he's gonna be speaking at this event later this week. Maybe, because I had always heard about sending thank you notes after a meeting, but this was almost the reverse of that. So I was like, wonder if it would help to send kind of like a pre-thank you, like, hey, I see that you're speaking at this event. I wanted to thank you ahead of time and kind of wish you good luck. And, I hope to learn a lot from you.
Super smart. I mean, that's really smart. I mean, if more people, you have an opportunity when people do that, because if you notice, if you go to, we haven't been to in-person events for a while, but when you start going back to them, like notice when the session's over, how many people go up there and talk to them. Like there's not that many usually, right? So you get a golden opportunity, the person sitting up there, And it's the speaker. Like, they're just waiting for you to come up there. And they're usually, like, even speakers that have been doing it for a long time, they still get a rush from it. They're still nervous. And they would so appreciate someone coming up and saying exactly what you're talking about. So it's going to make a huge impression. So that's a really smart thing to do it. And here's another tip would be like, when those conferences come to town, again, when they come back, like, for example, the digital summit's coming up. Like, when one of these conferences come to town and they bring these big time speakers, like, that's your opportunity to like reach out to them and say, hey, I see you're coming to town. Do you have 15 minutes for coffee? Because they do. They're sitting there in their hotel room. They have time. If you got to make the ask right, but like that, I think that's a great idea. So let's talk about events for a second, because you guys have all alluded to this. There's two different kinds of networking, right? There's the one-on-one coffee, which is very important, but there's also the networking events, which PRSA has one coming up. So, and for me, those are much different. Like, I much prefer the one-on-one coffees. I feel like I'm more comfortable there. I feel like I'm better there. The networking event stuff, I suck at. Like, I am terrible, and I know that. So I need to learn from you guys. Like, Liz, when you go to these networking events, like, how do you approach it? Like, because you got to work the room, right? You can't get there, see your friend, and talk to your friend for the whole time. Then you're not networking, right? So how do you do it so you can talk to as many people as possible?
Eric, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask for this, because I'm in the boat with you. I like those one-on-one coffees a little bit more, but I don't mind networking events. And I would just say use those as an opportunity you're meeting people outside of your circle, and everyone is there with the same goal in mind, to meet people. And so it just makes it a lot easier and more comfortable. And exactly, like, my approach with them has been, I use them as an opportunity to make connections so that I can then go get those one-on-one coffees. Right. So I'm not just a random person messaging them, hey, and not that there's anything wrong with that either, but I personally just use it as an approach to make those connections so that I can then take it a step further and connect one-on-one.
Yeah, that's kind of how I do it too. I'm not very good at it, but my whole thing with the in-person stuff is like, okay, this is an opportunity to get people one-on-one, because if you get them one-on-one, you got 45 minutes one-on-one. And that's way different than if you're at a networking event, drinking a beer, they're looking around, like, you don't even have their attention half the time.
Absolutely.
So that's a great point. Excellent. Well stated. Saskia or Beth, you guys, can you help me and Liz out? Maybe you're better at this than we are.
Sure. I totally agree. I love the one-on-ones better. I would say if you can, like, check the Facebook event or like the list of attendees to try and figure out who's going. Because then if you know someone's going to be there that you've been wanting to meet, you're coming in with a little bit more of a plan. And I like the idea of just using it as a kickoff to then like meet someone one-on-one where you're going to get a little bit more dedicated time.
Mm-hmm. Beth?
Yeah. I actually, so I guess I'm the oddball. Now I love the events, but when I first started, I kind of felt like I was playing pin the tail on the donkey, where I was blindfolded and they spin you around, and then, okay, I got to find someone to talk to. So I think definitely attending more and more events, you kind of start to figure out what to do. At first, I kind of just started kind of walking around, just being friendly, smiling at people and stuff like that. And then I would kind of try and eavesdrop on some of the conversations that were, going on around me and stuff. And then kind of like insert myself, not like into the conversation, but just close enough to where they're like, oh, hey, who are you? Nice to meet you. You want to chat with us for a little bit or whatever. And I think that really helped with making me a lot more comfortable at these events, because at first it's just like, you're dizzy, you don't know where to go because there's all these different groups of people who all know each other really well.
So, it's tough. It's like I said, I struggle with it too. It's not just people, it's not just a younger people thing. It's every age. And even if you know people, like when I still get nervous. I went to a networking event last week and I knew a few people, not a lot, but I was nervous. Like I had to go back to my whole thing where like one thing I tell the kids at St. Thomas is like, just stick your hand out. That's all you got to do, right? You stick your hand out, now you're committed. Now it's like they're going to shake. I mean, it's weird now with COVID, coming out of COVID, now everyone's going to shake hands, obviously, but you get the idea. Like if you stick your hand out or fist bump, whatever you want to do, like now you got to introduce yourself and then you're in and then you're talking, you know, but you got to stick the hand out. So, and that can be the hardest part. And I think for me, it's been resisting the urge to go to your friends, right? So like if you go to a networking event and you see a friend, it's like, you got to resist the urge, like maybe go say hi to them, but like don't hang out with them the whole time, right? Like you got to keep moving and meet and see other people. Otherwise you'll stay there all night, you know, and the longer you stay, the harder it gets to leave. So I want to ask, let's see, one more question before we go to kind of a group discussion, because I know some people will have some questions, or at least some thought starters that we haven't talked about. But I don't think we talked about this early on, but like the ask itself, which I think is sometimes very tough. Like, how do you make the ask, or send the email to, you know, person X saying, hey, I'd like to get together with you. Would you have, you know, time for me? Like, how do you, like, what do you write in the email? Like, how do you make the ask? Saskia, what have you had luck with in that approach?
Yeah, I think if it's an introduction from someone, I would say that, like, this person, you know, suggested this, and like tell them a little bit about themselves and say like, I'm really interested in your role, would love to hear a little bit more about what you do. Would you happen to have time for, you know, coffee for 30 minutes, like over the next few weeks? And then they'll probably respond and say, yes, I'd love to. And I think then your job is to like make it as easy for them as possible. So I always say like, I'm happy to, you know, come to your company, or like, I also saw that there's a Starbucks just down the street, happy to meet there. Cause I found that some people would rather meet at work and some people would much rather meet at like a local coffee shop. So offer to come to them, and then say, and this is in like the second email, not like the initial email, but once they've said yes. And then when it comes to like a time, I think even if you're like have nothing going on, like just pretend that you do and say like, yeah, I'm free, you know, next like Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, and, you know, Friday after work, like if any of those options happen to work for you. Otherwise, let me know and we can figure out something. So I would, you know, suggest a few times. That's, I think, better than, I had someone about a month ago that like asked to get coffee with me. And that was really cool to like be on this side of it. But she sent me a link to her Google Calendar and asked me to like pick out a time that she happened to be free, like within her schedule. And it kind of felt like then it was on me to be the one to find a time that worked for her, where it really should be the reverse. So just make sure that you're trying to make it, you know, as easy for them as possible, and suggest a few times rather than just saying like, I think a lot of people want to be helpful. So they say, whatever works for you, and I can come any day and I can come any place that works for you. But I think that almost makes it harder for the person that you're asking advice from. So, you know, suggest a place or two and, you know, throw out a few times and go from there in that second email once they've said yes.
Yep, that's really smart. I mean, making it easy is the biggest thing. Like, you got to think about, like, I had a friend, a guy I met years ago that worked at Weber when they were working in the towers down in 494 and 100. And I remember, I knew he couldn't leave, but I knew they had that Caribou downstairs. So I'd always tell him like, dude, I'll meet you at the Caribou. I'll just come down in 15 minutes, you know. I had a question for him or whatever, you know. I knew that was the only way I was going to get him. I wasn't going to get him to come up to me. That was for sure, you know. So like, you're right. You got to totally acquiesce to the person if you're the asker, right? If you're the asker, if you're the askee, right? Like, it's weird when it's like, well, accommodate my schedule. No. You ask me. Like, you need me more than I need you. Like so it's all on the asker for that. Liz, what have you done? Anything differently there that's worked?
Echoing Saskia, that's pretty much what I've done as well. I'd say in addition to that, just stating the why. I mean, I don't think just saying, hey, can we grab coffee is enough. I think you need to be really specific why you want to get coffee with that person, whether it's, hey, I see you're in this role. I'm curious about what your day-to-day looks like. I'm hoping, you're explaining why you want to get coffee with them rather than just kind of being vague. I think it gives them an idea too of like what they're walking into and whether or not they want to get the coffee. So I just think the more specific you can be on the why, the better.
Right. Or like common connection too, right? Like if it's like you guys have all mentioned, like alumni network, like, hey, I see we're both Buckies, you know, like, or we're both Metro State grads, you know, like that's gonna instantly connect you. So
Exactly.
okay, with that, let's spend some time opening up to the rest of you for questions for the lovely panelists. Any topics or questions we didn't tackle? Anybody? Otherwise, I got one quick. There we go. Oh, hold on. Sorry, Dan, I see your question. Hold on, I gotta find it. Hey, Kara, can people unmute, or do we have to do the chat?
I can unmute people.
Oh, okay. Did someone have a question? Sorry, I don't know how to identify people. Not everyone has their first name on here. All right, Dan, let me find your question. Sorry. Or Dan, do you want to ask it? Why don't you ask it?
Yeah, you should be able to unmute now.
Well, there we go.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the panel. It's been a really good discussion. I've done a lot of coffees, not as many as Arik, but quite a few over my time. My question was, when I meet particularly with college students or people new to the industry, I always encourage them to stay connected in some form with me, and very few of them ever do. It's pretty rare. I even have gone so far as to suggest maybe you put a calendar reminder on your calendar for 3 months, 6 months out, something like that. And I saw that Rose kind of did a similar comment in the comments, which is this is about building a relationship, right? It's not a one-off, bam, I want to meet you and I'm done. So what are your strategies for maintaining a longer term relationship with people that you do ask to go to coffee with?
I'll jump in here. I kind of sound like a broken record, but social media is the easiest way to maintain that relationship and to foster those. A simple congrats on your new role, congrats on getting married or having a baby, to bring in that personal element. So I just say, yeah, social media is one of the best ways, in my opinion, to maintain that relationship and to really foster it.
Mm-hmm. What if the person's not on social media?
Who's not on social media these days?
Some people.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. I was gonna challenge a little bit, Liz, which is I'm an older gentleman and my social presence is pretty limited, right?
Dan's not, yep.
And so for somebody like me, how do you maintain that relationship?
Yeah, that's a good challenge. I would say, to your point then, those calendar updates of just checking in via email saying, hey, we met 6 months ago, wanted to check in, see how you're doing. But that's a really good question. I want to think about that and see what other creative ways I could come up with, because you're right, not everyone is as present on social media. So
I can jump in. What I like to do is I just use my resources. So just connect where you can. So obviously there's networking events and stuff through PRSA, but if there's anything else going on in the area that maybe is happening, like, for you, Dan, you're, Mall of America. So if there's anything that, you might be attending in participation for or whatever, connect that way, or use whatever social medias you do have. So LinkedIn's a great way, because most professionals, if they're not on Facebook, a lot are usually on LinkedIn. So at least connecting and engaging on LinkedIn, and somebody shared a really great article, maybe not just liking it, but just commenting like, wow, that's a really great insight on this issue, this topic, or whatever, and engaging where you can with what you can.
Yeah, I think even like a follow-up email can be nice too, but maybe open it up with like, hi Eric, like how was your trip to the North Shore? Like, just open it up with like something personal that you talked about, and then maybe just like check in on a project that you're working on. I find that like it's less intimidating to send a follow-up email if I feel like I have something like important to share with them, or like a cool article that's relevant to their work. Or again, what I do, I have access to some like research tools that other people don't. And so if I find like a cool piece of research, maybe sharing that. So just trying to like add a little value add via like a follow-up email can be good too. Cause it's always intimidating to be like, hello, like I'm back, like here's a little bit about my life now. So just like trying to make it a little bit more relevant to like their work or your conversation that you had with them.
And I'll throw out another one for Dan specifically, even though now I'm going to say this and I feel bad, Dan, that I've been to the mall like probably a million times since I last saw you and I haven't done this, but like he works at the Mall of America. The offices are in the Mall of America. Like he would like to see you probably, like just stop by and say hi. And if he's not there, it's like leave a note. And then it's like, hey, Eric stopped by. And then he'll probably, you would call me probably then, right? And it's like, hey, we'd have coffee together. So like, I think sometimes it's like getting outside the box and thinking like, okay, and that applies for some of the other people on the call too. There's some of these other people that have offices that are in public spaces, and like, you could just stop by and say hi.
There's only like probably 10 or 15 coffee shops in the mall, so I don't know if you have that much of an opportunity.
Right, yes. Good question, Dan, thank you. Let's see, I saw another question here from Lynette. She asks, what was the most, and this was similar to one of the ones I asked you, but a little bit different. What was the most influential coffee interview that you've been on, and who was it with?
I can kick that one off. Mine has been actually within the agency that I'm at, with the woman that now became my manager. And so I started out in the PR side, and through the work that I was doing, started to become a little bit more interested in strategy. And I think it's still important to do some of those, like grab coffee with people that you work with and maybe work in different departments just to get to know them a little bit better. And so we started chatting, and I ended up getting a little bit more work from her. And we started just like once a month connecting before work. And that turned into a little bit of a mentorship, and she is actually now my manager. So that's the right thing to say. Just, don't hesitate to still do some of these coffees within your company with people that you're trying to get to know better.
Yay.
Mm-hmm. I think I would say, I think I mentioned, earlier, so my first coffee was through, I was introduced through my first PR teacher, and she set me up with Leah Condes from Padilla, and that was probably the most influential because that's literally what got my foot in the door. So, just being involved in the committee and learning a lot from her, even just on the first meeting about like just the several various areas that PR or that PRSA specifically can lead to, and it was great because she had a lot of good things to say, a lot of good PRSA stories, and yeah, learned a lot.
That's awesome.
For me, I have two people who, Rose is on the phone or on the line. Hi, Rose, miss you. I've always walked away with something when I've met with Rose from day one. We've had a few coffee dates, and it's just been, she opened my eyes so much to the industry and just PR overall. So that's definitely high on my list, or you're definitely high on my list, Rose. But also Matt Furman, he's the Chief Communications Officer at Best Buy Corporate. And I had the opportunity to intern there post-graduation after Metro State for a little over 7 months. And he took the time to have a coffee meeting with me. And I was extremely nervous, to say the least. And he kind of stopped me mid coffee, and he just was like, calm down, basically. And he said, you've got a lot going on, but you take these opportunities to really show how professional you are. Because I was using a lot of words like, oh, that's awesome, or like a lot, and a lot. And so he really, for the first time, one of the first people to teach me, show up and be professional. That doesn't mean that you have to be a robot, but really be cognizant of your ums and your likes and your essentially like your slang too. And I hear myself saying like now, so, but he was definitely a very influential person on the way that I show up to meetings and with people in the industry. So
that's a good one. I'm sure Rose has had a similar impact on many, many, many people.
she has.
All right, I got another question. This one is from, sorry, I don't know your first name, Miss Wexler, but M. Wexler. Do you want to ask it? Where is she? I saw her before. She might have dropped off.
Hi, right up here. Not dropped off.
Hey, there you are.
Oh, sorry.
Hello,
Yeah,
ask away.
Wexler. You know, first I just want to comment, my gosh, this is fabulous. You know, when I was coming out of school, I just didn't have people like you, all of you, helping me figure out how to network and get out there. And oddly enough, I may run a business development group, but social anxiety, right here. I'm the one who wants to back into the wall and just observe, right? So I want to just say, one of the best ways, well, things have happened in the pandemic that have just shifted me profoundly and professionally and personally. I think we all have felt that, but networking became so much more accessible to me online. You know, I'm a mother, have a busy career, you know, all the things we all, you know, carry with us. But having all of these digital and virtual opportunities, I have found them to be fabulous. And I found them to be less intimidating to network and just jump in and do what I'm doing now, talk. But we know we're coming out of the pandemic. And again, we're going to see some shifting. How do you all plan to network moving forward? Really, because I think we're going to see a shift with, we'll have live and in-person events. We'll have virtual events that'll run for a while simultaneously. You know, what do you see yourself doing? And I'm just curious.
Good question.
Thanks.
What do you think, Beth, Liz, Saskia?
I think it's a great question. I think that being adaptable and yeah, definitely. I've always been one of those people throughout the whole pandemic that's just like, oh, I can't wait till this is over. I just want to see people again and connect. And I think just being able to kind of hold my horses a little bit and be patient and flexible. And I think that a lot of people are going to, you know, start slowly inching into having the in-person events again, but also having that plan B available for, you know, should unfortunately, knock on wood, that the worst should happen, just being able to just pivot right away and, you know, yeah, exactly. Having an alternative plan, but for the same event, but being able to quickly, you know, be able to relay the message to, you know, all your attendees. And yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I'm personally looking forward to those in-person events again, and those one-on-one coffees at a coffee shop and not in the spare bedroom. But I also, to your point, exactly, like, I think virtual meetings aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And I say this, and I don't exactly know how I'm going to do it, but I'd love to figure out a way, how can I connect with people across the country, you know, because it has opened the door to meeting, to doing that now. And so how can I, you know, connect with someone at an agency out in New York or out in Chicago, you know, wherever, and really, really expand my network. And so that's one area that I'm really going to try to hone in on and see what opportunities are out there, because exactly, virtual isn't going anywhere. So.
And you know what? I can't wait to hear how that goes. I hope I can find out. I'm going to connect with you.
Now I absolutely have to figure it out.
Yeah, I love that.
Challenge
Thank you.
Challenge accepted.
I love it.
Good question. I think.
Can I add one more thing? I'm
yeah, go
sorry, and then I'm going to stop. The
Yep.
other thing I want to tell everybody, you know, I've recently been involved with Greg McKinney, Dan, you as well, Greg Zimprich on something PRSA, and this group is working on some local businesses called an internship with Metro State University students.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how I came to this, doing this was networking, and Beth, Brett, she brought this opportunity to us, but I have a point here. I have found networking to be so much more meaningful and fun and real and authentic because I have found a cause I believe in. And that cause is personal to me, like a passion thing, right? Like it's more comfortable for me to talk about these wonderful initiatives like the internship program in Metro State University. I'm on my company's D&I committee. I love that. So it's made it easier for me. So I know it was brought up, but I'm just thinking really, you know, cause driven, passion, find that personal thing that drives you and you become more comfortable speaking up. And PRSA gives so many opportunities to do that. You guys are fabulous at that. Anyway, okay, that was it. Thank you.
Good ad. Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions? Otherwise, I got one closer. Anyone going once, going twice, going 3 times? Okay. My final question is somewhat pandemic related and timely. Is that like how many? Let's see. Can we use the reaction button? By show of hands with the reaction button, how many people have done an in-person coffee so far? Okay, a couple people. So not a lot though. That's kind of what I expected. So as more of us do that in the coming months, I feel like, having done one, well, a number of them recently, like dress code is suddenly a big issue because we haven't done this in a long time, right? So like I went to a big networking event a week ago and I literally turned into a 3-year-old and like, I don't know what I'm going to wear. So now I'm kind of using it as a social experiment. So I didn't know what to wear and I probably bungled it or whatever, but like I had a coffee yesterday and I walked out the door I had some like joggers on and this new polo sweatshirt that I got. And my wife looks at me, are you going to a coffee? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do a little social experiment and see what happens. I would never normally wear that to a coffee. I'm usually very buttoned up. I usually have some similar to this jacket on, whatever. And I thought, let's just see, because I have a feeling the tide's going to change here. So my question is, what does dress code look like, you know, coming out of this thing? Is it going to change, or are we still going to be, you know, are we expected to be as dressed up as we were beforehand now?
I think it's going to be a lot more relaxed. I don't know that I would show up in my sweats, but I mean, I feel like
joggers.
You know, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess those are different, but I feel like still, as long as everything is clean and you don't look like a hobo, I mean, I personally wouldn't care, but again, I feel like I would maybe judge it based on who I'm, like literally the level of person with whom I'm meeting.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer.
I mean, I'll jump in here. I think it could depend on, you know, who you're meeting with. I know a lot of us are going back to some sort of hybrid model in the next few months here, meaning either 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week, what have you. So maybe depending on what day you're catching them, if you're catching them on a work from home day on a Monday or Friday, they might be a little bit more relaxed. Or if you're catching them on a Tuesday morning and they're in the office, it might be a little bit more professional. But that's a really good question. So it might be a reason to go shopping, which I'm not mad about.
There you go.
No excuse needed.
I think it's going to loosen. You know what, because again, in the 2 brief months I've been doing this, like, it's been all over the board. Like, some people are really dressed up just like they were before. And then one person I remember showed up just from a workout. Like, she was, not only did she have her workout clothes, she was sweaty. Like, she would have never done that 2 years ago, right? Never. She did it. So I think it's a brave new world. I think it's going to be a totally different ballpark. Rose made a comment that if you're on the job seeking front, to err on the side of dressing up, which I would probably agree with. I mean, if you're there to make an impression, well, make an impression. But for some of the other networking that goes on, maybe colleague to colleague, I think it might be a little bit looser. And I think my approach with a lot of this stuff coming out of this pandemic has been like, I'm gonna give people a lot of rope. Like, if you want to show up how you want to show up, like, I don't care. I'm not here to judge for a while, like, because everyone's in a different place coming out of this stuff. And but I just think that dress code that's such an interesting thing right now, because I heard people talking about it on Zoom the other day too. Like, they were saying the Zoom rules have loosened. Like, people are wearing hats, they're eating on camera now. Like people are done. Like, they're just done. And the rules might be a little off for a while, I have a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, I think that's probably a good place to stop. I want to thank our panelists, Beth, Saskia, Liz. Well done, well done. Very nice job. Thank you for spending an hour and a half of your valuable time with us today. For those of you on the call, thank you for participating and again, spending an hour and a half of your day with us. Speaking of coffee and networking, like Jennifer said at the outset, PRSA does have an event coming up. So please visit minnesotapursa.org to sign up for that. And other than that, I'm sure some of these lovely people on the call would appreciate a coffee invite from any number of you. So feel free to coffee away, and hopefully this event can spur a bunch of new connections. Yeah, and with that, everyone have a great day. We'll see many of you soon.